there! Welcome back to another video on my channel. Today I'm joined by Mooch. And so I don't know, I've never recorded with Mooch before. She's a little clingy, so that's why she's here. But if she's a good girl, she'll be a good girl. If not, she'll just chill. She was just on my lap earlier, but she seems pretty curious about the window. Mooch is a new addition to the family. Literally new as in like a week ago, and we're just all getting used to things together. So yeah, she might have a cameo in this video. Woohoo! Okay, but anyway, this video is not about her. I just wanted to do a quick like reading wrap up for the month of March. Truthfully, March. Other than we've been a little busy, if you can see. So my reading list isn't that super extensive. But I still just wanted to share with you guys what I've been reading and what I'm currently reading. So if you're interested in that, no. So anyway, if you're interested in that, just keep on watching. So my first read for this month was actually something I picked up on a whim at the library. And it is called Frankenstein, A Love Story. I don't have the book with me right now because I returned it to said library since then. But I will put a picture of the cover up on here for you guys. But yeah, so this, I picked it up because I read the back cover and it like talked about being a love story between a trans lead who is a doctor and their like love interest who is pretty much like eccentric scientist type kind of guy who is really trying to push the limits in terms of like artificial intelligence and AI, right? So I thought that was interesting, and then it was juxtaposed to like just to flashbacks to like Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein herself. It's not necessarily time travel, except maybe at the end. I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything for you. But that's what it was told. So it was supposed to be a back and forth between Mary Shelley's life with her husband and then like her writing Frankenstein, and then flash forward to like this modern day Frankenstein issues, talking about like AI and like the sort of advancements that, or the potential of AI and the potential of no longer needing like a human body to sustain consciousness, I guess. Like the main goal of the main character's boyfriend was to basically upload their consciousness into a like supercomputer, which I know is like the goal of like some really extremist AI tech bros or whatever. Okay, so execution though. So like all these ideas, I was really okay, sorry, there's like an ambulance or something going by. Anyway, so yeah, that was the premise of the book, and I was really interested to see where that was go, because although I don't normally read a lot of romances, not particularly spicy romances, I was interested in the premise of like this discussion about technology, right? And personhood and how that can change and evolve. There's also part of the tagline was roping you in because this talks about like AI and like sex robots and certain issues that may arise with those. And I was like, okay, yeah, we got chat GPT, we got artificial intelligence, we got sex robots, we got issues of like not issues, but like discussions about identity in terms. We got discussions about gender identity and queerness, and like what does how does that fit in our conception of personhood and our relationship to our bodies. So all that, I thought, okay, this could be really cool. This could be very interesting to talk about, sprinkled in with whatever smutty romance there is. Okay. I just don't think the execution lived up to the hype I had in my head on a number of different fronts. So this was done by somebody who is a queer person, but they are not like a gender queer person. I think they are a lesbian, but I don't think they are trans in any sense of the word. So according to what I saw, right? And this is like important for authenticity, right? The trans character, which identifies as a trans man, right? But they're not like fully transitions, which you don't have to be to identify as a fully trans man. But the discussion about the main character's body in particular was more of a discussion of androgyny than it is necessarily what it's like to be a trans man. And when they do talk about what it's like to be a trans man, it is a scene that's filled with sexual violence, um, which I thought was unnecessary because it didn't serve the plot. Like, it was never addressed. It was never talked about again after the fact it happens. It was more of those things like, oh, these people experience sexual violence. Bam. And it didn't really prove any point to the story other than that. Or the main character doesn't seem affected by it afterwards. It was just, I don't know if it was for shock value or what, but anyway, so it was an unnecessary scene of sexual violence against a trans man. And then even the way the partner talked about the trans main character was not validating to their identity, because oftentimes they would refer to them as something androgynous or like half woman, half man, or use language that like refer to them or still refer to their previous gender, which I would assume, and again, I don't know because I'm not a trans man, but I assume if you are transitioning and you identify as a trans man as opposed to a non-binary, right? Then you would want your partner, your romantic partner, to be affirming of your gender identity, even if you don't necessarily have what we would associate with male genitalia, right? Because it's validating, and if somebody cares about you, they're going to validate your experiences, right? So that didn't really happen, and the main character really didn't give any pushback towards that. I think the author thought more about like the philosophy of gender and wanted to talk about how arbitrary gender can be, especially in a futuristic society, which lots of sci-fi books have already done, and they have done better than this one. And it's a shame because I think this person was trying to speak to an experience they know nothing about. And I think their point would have been better served had they included somebody who is non-binary as opposed to a strict trans man. And it was kind of a letdown on that point. And I think there's better trans representation out there. So if you're looking for that, please don't pick up this book. I believe, and again, I don't have any skin in this game, but I believe it is borderline transphobic just because of the treatment or how people speak to this character. And it's like there's certain characters that are meant to be perceived as like ignorant, like haha type things, like, oh, they're a Trump supporter, haha, they're ignorant. And of course they misgender the main character, but what she doesn't realize, or what the author doesn't realize, is that she's constantly misgendering this character too through who's supposed to be the love interest, or at least I assume more likable than that, and this person never once corrects this person. So I don't know. I think it's another instance of I think like a sensitivity read would have really, really helped this book out in terms of that. But moving beyond that, sorry, here's Mooch. Okay. Moving beyond that, I still think that there's other elements that just made this book a little bit difficult to read. I think they wanted it to read like literary fiction, like high literary fiction. This is also a British writer, so there was no like quotes for dialogue, and at times, like, I guess it could be confusing. Like, luckily, each character's voice is distinct enough so you kind of know who's talking. But with that, there was a lot of stereotypical caricatures done with some characters, and like it was just, this book read like one big stream of consciousness almost, instead of something with a concrete plot. And while I do appreciate the connections with like the past, like historical fiction of Mary Shelley's life, and the connections that were made to the future, the ending also kind of felt like a letdown in a sense too. I was more interested in what the sci-fi elements were going to be about this, and they weren't sci-fiing the way I wanted them to. And then like for the romance part, I was also disappointed with that. Like, I made a comment in my Goodreads review, and it's a little like risque for me because normally I don't really poke fun at others' perceptions of intimacy, but like through most of the sex scenes, they were talking about like philosophy in the middle of doing it. And I was just like, are y'all doing sex right? Yeah, are they? Sorry, you heard mommy talk about sex and you got really, really uncomfortable, huh? Yeah, okay. Yeah, but are they doing it right? Because like I get a little distracted and I'm not in the headspace to be able to discuss philosophy or politics or whatever in the bedroom. That could be like a before or after activity, sure. But like during, I I don't know. I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. That's just me. So this book all the way around, I didn't really super enjoy it, and I was pretty disappointed by it. But yeah, this one just doesn't hit. So if you see this, reader beware. I guess I don't know. So the second thing I read this month was actually partially researched for my own book, and I think I already talked about it in a previous video of mine. I made a video about quiet horror, and I included this short story in my quiet horror video. So if you already see that, sorry, this little part is going to be repetitive. But if you haven't, the third thing I read this month is called The Yellow Wallpaper, and it is a short story. It's a classic short story. If you want to get more into the classics of like horror in general, or like especially psychological horror, I would really recommend The Yellow Wallpaper. Again, it's a short story, so it's a quick read. But like I think that this is something that could be studied in like a literature class or something like that. So the Yellow Wallpaper is a um, so like the main character is writing these diary entries, and so she's writing about her lived experience as it's happening. These diaries are kept in secret because she is feeling sick, and her husband is her doctor, right? And he is renting out this like mansion so that she can get some bed rest. um and he really encourages her to like just not do anything. um but even though she feels like talking to other people or going outside, he's just like, oh, that no, don't do that. So yeah, so she's basically bedridden, not even in the nice part of the house, but in this like old ass attic that with like weird ass yellow wallpaper, and everything looks disheveled. And she's confined to the bed there, and his sister also comes in and helps, is like her caretaker too. But she kind of like, as the story progresses, you can tell like she kind of descends into madness a little bit further. She starts getting paranoid about like the husband and her sister-in-law like conspiring against her to a certain degree. She also starts like having these hallucinations. So she really fixates on this ugly ass yellow wallpaper. And at first it's just how ugly it is. But then she starts seeing like the shapes move about in the yellow wallpaper. And then she sees a woman in the yellow wallpaper. And then, spoiler alert for the end, she starts to believe that she is the woman that lives in the yellow wallpaper, and that she's like all crawling around and being creepy on the floor and stuff like that. She like takes the key all the entire time. She just wants to get out of the room, but eventually she like takes the key of the room and like locks herself in and like chucks it out the window basically. And this is like, when I heard about it at first, I took it as a study in the how destimulation affects the mind, especially for people who are undergoing some sort of psychosis. I mentioned another book in my one of my previous reading wrap ups that was about psychology, memory, and emotions. And the person who wrote it specialized in like postpartum, like after you have a baby, postpartum like psychosis in women. And she believed that a lot of stories were reflective of that. And she cited this one as an instance where there wasn't a proper treatment for something that could be displayed as like psychosis in a woman, because I think she just had a baby recently too. And you'd be surprised how many women actually experience psychosis after they have a baby. I know we talk about like postpartum depression a lot, but there's also that too. That depersonalization, or that like your reality is not matching what's going on in your head type scenario. Um, so yeah, there's that. And there's something else that I saw other people talk about that I didn't realize when I read the book, is that even for that time period, the dyes that were used to make yellow or like that kind of tonal of wallpaper were also probably used things like arsenic or things that weren't very good for you. So not only is she could be suffering from this poor mental state, and her husband slash doctor is like pushing down her needs and not listening to her, but there's also this element of like the wallpaper itself could be poisoning her, which I thought was super interesting. So I didn't consider that because I didn't have that contextual knowledge. But with that contextual knowledge, it makes a lot more sense. So I really like the Yellow Wallpaper as a short. If you're looking for a short read that is reflective on uh, the female experience and like the difficulty of getting proper medical care, I guess, I don't know. I would encourage you to check out the Yellow Wallpaper. Okay, so the third book I read for March, or one I actually finished up, I've been working on this bad boy for a long time. This is what I've been working on, and I just finished this month. It's The New Science of Plant Intelligence, Planta Sapiens by Paco Calvo, and with assistance from Natalie Lawrence. Okay, so I picked this up at the bookstore because I really wanted to do research again for my book mod because again, this is going to have like sci-fi elements to it, and I thought about incorporating plants into the sci-fi element. So I kind of wanted to learn more about plants and like their capacities for intelligence, if this is going to be like an alien sci-fi type book. So I picked this up because it seemed to be promising, but I have mixed feelings about this book. So this again is nonfiction. I read quite a bit of nonfiction. I kind of like default into nonfiction a lot. I don't know why. Maybe it's just like the post grad school blues, where I feel like I constantly have to learn stuff. Um, but anyway, so I picked this up, and it's kind of hard because I feel like this, and no shade, because I don't want to diminish anybody's like research, but I feel like this is less sciencey than some of the other um, plant-based, non-plant-based, plant nonfiction books I've read. Like even with, I read something else called Planting Clues, which was about how plants are used to solve true crime cases, and that one was rich and full of information. I mean, it was still entertaining, but it definitely read more like nonfiction. But it gave contextual studies about like again plants used as clues to solve murders, or also talked about like the orchid black market, which I didn't know was a thing until now. That one was great. This one felt more like rambling. And I don't know if that's just the writing style. Like obviously the person who wrote this is very passionate about re-examining plant science from a non-animal bias, right? So like something that I thought was important that was discussed here is how we assume that plants are lesser forms of living things just because they move so slowly, and that we equate movement with intelligence when it comes to living things and animals, which is why like you can see, say, like a dog react to things in real time, because you can see them process the information in real time and then like respond. Whereas for plants, you don't get that immediate response unless it's something like a Venus flytrap that possesses more animalistic qualities of like hunting for food. Um, so yeah, so it was talking about deconstructing your worldview to like when we're measuring plants and plants' intelligence. It also talked about the dangers of also assigning I forget the word for it. It's a bigger word, but basically like projecting personalities onto plants or projecting personhood onto plants. Um, when you do studies, because that's another form of confirmation bias. So I was talking about confirmation bias in two extremes, which I appreciated. But then also like it just kind of didn't really give substance. Like there were some references to studies that were going on, but a lot of them seemed like the results were inconclusive, or like people like the greater scientific community criticized some of the examples that were used in this book. Not to say that it's invalid, but it reads like rambling, and it's not as like the evidence isn't as concrete as like I was hoping it would be. And then later towards the end, it talked about the possibilities of plants shaping how we use AI, and like how, which I thought was interesting, how they were talking about like making rovers for the moon, or like machines to like traverse future planets, and they were talking about like redesigning the mechanics for that to look more like a vine where the machine grew as opposed to something that would move around in wheels. But I don't know how feasible that technology is just yet. I don't know, because there wasn't really like any hardcore citations about that. It was a lot more of hypotheticals. So I feel like this book is great for hypotheticals. The person who wrote this is a plant scientist, yes, but they also have degrees in philosophy. So this kind of read more like somebody who's excited about philosophy and the potential of plant intelligence, as opposed to the concrete evidence of whether or not plants show intelligence. Like there are some interesting arguments for, because it was talking about how plants can exhibit learned behaviors based on like learning like where the sun's going to be presented in certain areas, because that's not like a guaranteed thing all the time. And I'm trying to go off the top of my head because I read this a little bit ago. So there was interesting contextual evidence, or like the movements of a creeping vine like over time, and if you speed it up, like you can see more like decision making, what looks like decision making based movements. But again, a lot of this felt kind of wishy-washy to me, and I felt like if it had more case studies, then I feel like that would have supported this person's claim a little bit more instead of anecdotal evidence, because I feel like a lot of this was based on like anecdotal evidence as opposed to like citing case studies. And it was more about the process of like, oh, this is how I started this discussion, and this is who I'm talking to, and this is who else supports it, this is who doesn't, which is fine. But like, if you're presenting an argument, I would like more concrete evidence for your argument. So like for a sciencey nonfiction book, this is okay. I would just be careful for people reading this, because this kind of reads like those like shows on the History Channel that are like, what if, blah, blah, blah. And I don't mean that to discredit the information presented here, but it does give that sort of energy of like those, like History Channel type shows that are like, what if plants were intelligent? And then this would look like, and like hypothetically, we can assume that their intelligence based on X, Y, and Z, even though the evidence for that is heavily debated and criticized in the scientific community. So yeah, I don't know. So yeah, that's what I've been reading for March, or what I read for March, and I can't believe March is like already over. This month I feel like moves so fast, whereas the other months this year have been super slow, and I don't know if I'm just busier or what, but like I've been going through it. So yeah, that's probably why I don't have an extensive reading list for you. In terms of like what I'm reading right now, I picked up Emily Wilde's what's the title? Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I just want to switch it up, and I was watching this other book reviewer who I really really like. Her YouTube name is With Cindy. I think she used to be Reads with Cindy, but I think she rebranded to With Cindy because of Twitter stuff. I don't know. But like I listen to With Cindy's book reviews quite often because I just find her insightful and entertaining. And she read that one and she liked it, so I picked up Emily Wilde's With Fairies. It was something that I kind of wanted to read anyway, but I don't read a lot of romance fiction books, so this is again new territory for me. But it's very popular, so we'll see. And also, I might kind of like borrow some like fairy elements for Maud. I don't know. I'm like kind of all over the place with Maud, truthfully. Like, I need to like just sit down and like vent about like being stuck with that book, because I'm going all over the place with it right now. And like I've been kind of like jumping ship to write like smaller like shits and giggles projects, especially this week. So yeah, I don't know. We'll stay tuned for that. But yeah, so anyway, that's what I've been reading. I'm reading that one, and then when I returned my library books, I wasn't going to pick up anything else, and then I got a drink with lunch and I got tipsy. So I did get 2 books at the library. One of them is, what was it called, ID or something, and it's talking about how we form personalities and identities. But like, okay, so I had this like research question, and maybe I didn't go about it the right way at the library, and again, I was tipsy, so I don't know. But I kind of want to do research more into like the evolutionary reasons why we develop personalities, and like why. Because okay, so here's what I was thinking about. Like, we all have our own identities and personality and things that shape us, and obviously that influences your personality, correct? Okay, sorry. So my question was, does that have an evolutionary benefit, or is that just something that kind of happened? And you can see like animals have certain personalities too, but like you would think if there's like a survival of the fittest, and like let's just say that it benefited the entire group to be assertive, right? Because being assertive helps you survive in the wild. It makes you a better hunter, or whatever the be. Then why are there so many shy people out there, right? You would think that the two would counteract each other, or is it more about like the survival of the community instead, right? Where you need a mixture of assertive people and shy people. And I don't want it to be like some alpha male wolf bullshit, because we all know that's bullshit, and I will fight anyone on that 100%. That's not what I mean, but I mean like individuality. Why is individuality a thing? Where did that come from? Does it have like an evolutionary origin? Is that something that like helped us? How did this come into being? And so that's like what I've been kind of focusing on. So I found one book that might help with that. It's a little dated, it's from 97. um, but if any of you guys have any books that kind of like would help me answer these questions, I really appreciate it. And like let me know in the comments down below if you know of any books, or if you know of any articles or research that really helps with like why we have personalities. I would really, really appreciate it. I'm sure that it's been studied before. Most things have. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where my questions right now are. It's like, where does personality and individuality come from? I know personalities are a mix of like genetics and like lived experiences, but you know why? I guess I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, so I picked up that book, and then also Tipsy Me got just like a book that was like about ghost stories and aliens and people's fascination with the paranormal. So wish me luck on that. That one's also a weird one. I found them both in the nonfiction section, so I'm interested to see. And it's funny because there's so much like witchy stuff in the nonfiction section next to psychology, and I was like, interesting. So yeah, so I was just kind of dilly dallying, and so hopefully I'll get to those in April, and I'll let you guys know if they're any good or not. But yeah, so that's currently on my reading list for April. So I'll read those and review them for you guys next month. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video entertaining, and until next time, thanks. Bye. Yeah, say bye. Okay.